across the country was um, just, well, I've heard the, blown away, et cetera, people that I've known who've been involved in starting villages. And Beacon Hill Village started because if any of you know Beacon Hill in Boston, um, they're, it's hilly and they're tall buildings and houses and so on. And some people have been talking about getting together and maybe having meals delivered or helping each other. And a woman who was one of the leaders in these discussions um, was went upstairs in the attic of her house in the middle of this snowstorm in Boston to hold her husband as he reached out the window. He had a rope wrapped around his waist. As he reached out the window to hammer at the ice that was forming on their roof. And as she was holding this roof, she said she was saying to herself, there's got to be another way. There's got to be another way. And thus, Beacon Hill Village began to take their first steps. And so Shirley and I talked about it. Shirley thought it was a great idea and decided to send an email out to everyone. And this was January of 2006. Sent out an email, nothing. Sent out another email, neighbors and friends, nothing. So a year later, we decided that we were probably going to do something. Shirley had tried to bring her mother here from the Midwest and found that trying to get the kinds of services that we were talking about, either she was put on hold by various agencies, or they didn't know what she was talking about, or there were just dead end phone numbers. And so that was when we decided, okay, we will start this Ashby Village. And, I recently, I guess it was a week or so after Charlie talked to me, I pulled out the notebook that I had written down all of our first year notes. And our first meeting was in Shirley's living room. And that was January 11th, 2007. And 7 women got together and we asked 2 questions. How are your parents aging? And what has that experience been like for you? And then how do you want to age? Now, remember, we were all 12 years younger, and it was clear that absolutely everyone wanted to stay in their own home. They wanted to have a community, and this was going to be the guiding light for us, staying at home. We began to talk to some people in the community, and it took 2.5 years to get the concept together and to really have some movers and shakers in the community, and especially in the aging community. UC Berkeley, at Lifelong Medical Care, for those of you who are familiar with the Over 60 Health Center. And they were all very supportive and saying, go ahead, try this, start this. Both Shirley and I actually were both working full time at that point. And so that's why it took us 2.5 years. We really could not have done it without the organizations, and then without people like Mary Jo and Judy Bowe and Carol Takaki and the people who were there in the beginning. And if I've forgotten, Sue Deal. who just ran with the idea. As we began to say, let's get some volunteers, people stepped forward. We have to build if we have volunteers, there's certain criteria we have to fill. We have to check out who volunteers are. We can't have just anyone going into everybody's house. So we really had to build an organization, and that means a board and bylaws and budgets and policies and procedures and training manuals and so on and so forth. And we also needed to have an executive director. We were shooting for June 2010. And we hired a woman who does this for new organizations. As she comes in and puts together an office. She orders the telephone. She begins to put together a mailing list and all of the things you need to do to start something. That was probably one of the smartest things that we did. And meanwhile, we were I think Sue, I met in Kensington, was it? At a Kensington meeting. We began to talk to various groups in living rooms. We went to some community centers, but mostly it was in people's living rooms. And we asked, what is it you want to do with aging? How do you want to age? And absolutely everyone said, we want to wait. We want to be at home. There's no question. We want to be at home. Well, why? What's going to keep you from being at home? Well, one woman said, I can't change light bulbs anymore. I can't get up on a ladder, and I'm not going to do that. That's why I want to have a village. Someone else talked about having somebody buy groceries. And Judy, you remember some of the other things that we were looking at early on. We were, as a volunteer, you were there very, very early.
Well, Joanne and I were realtors. Joanne still is. And so we knew people in the service industries, and we knew which ones we thought would be best to work with people in their homes as they aged. And we put together a list, and that was my part in this, but there were many other people. Yeah.
Well, that was really important, because if you call a village now and you want a referral to a plumber or an electrician or whatever, these are all people who have been recommended by village members, but also they have been thoroughly vetted, as Judy says, to be able to go into someone's home. And so that was really, really very important, because we knew that we had a responsibility to keep people safe. And that was, I think, one of the most important things. Volunteers had to go through a training program, a very extensive training program. They had to learn how to help people if they had trouble walking or if they needed some guidance. We built a whole social care organization. We had a group of social workers and clinical psychologists who felt it was really important that we have the ability to talk to people who maybe have questions about an ailing spouse, other issues that they may be having, depression or whatever. And this group, the social care group of clinicians, all members, began to develop a program, and we had some group therapy and so on and so forth. And that's when we worked with Jewish Family Children's Services in a way that we still do, which is to their Aging in Community program will provide 3 visits by their social worker to come and talk to people who are dealing with various issues. They were very supportive in everything that we were doing. And that's been a wonderful relationship to have. Actually, right now, we have just started, and I'm not familiar with all of the details of it, but we have started a relationship with the Wright Institute, Graduate School of Clinical Psychology, and some of their 4-year postdoc, or not postdoc, but doctoral students are now going to be available to provide counseling sessions. And I understand that has been very, very well received. These are the things we didn't even think
Pat,
about.
mention the other connection.
The other
The
connection.
thrill for you of the Wright Institute fellows.
The Wright, but it didn't come through that. One of our members, Janet Hurwich, who had taught at the Wright Institute, who is a clinical psychologist, had talked to the director about starting this therapy program, especially right now when so many of us are stuck in the house and we're dealing with all of these issues. And I have to say that our youngest daughter is a professor at the Wright Institute now, and a lot of these students are her students that she had been mentoring and working with over the years. She's not involved in this Ashby Village piece at all. So I want to make sure everyone knows that there is no relationship, but that they were very excited to have the opportunity to talk to people. And there are more and more young therapists who are coming along who really want to be involved in the world of aging. And so we're able to answer that. And if you know of anyone in the village who would like to talk to a therapist, I think that Pat Carvalho is the person who's putting it together at this point. As I was looking through notes and so on, and how do you talk about something that has been so much a part of your life for so long? And watching it change, watching it grow, getting to know people who I would have never, ever known before has been probably the greatest gift of these later years of my life. I've met people who have become tremendously close friends. As we age, making friends is a little bit harder. But I've made friends with people who I've been able to share some of my darkest secrets with. I don't know, but to be able to share what it's like to be in your community and to be supported by your community, and to know that you can call up, that you can dial a phone. And this is one of the things that we started to talk about, I think, our first meeting in January of 2007. We want people to be able to pick up the phone and say, I need a volunteer who's going to come and go grocery shopping for me, someone who's going to help me at the doctor's office and will take notes because I get just too overwrought when I'm there and I don't remember everything the doctor's saying. Um, I think one of my favorite stories of what volunteers have done is actually this happened in the first year. Um, one of our members called the office. She had tree trimmers in her yard, and the branch of a tree had fallen and broken a table that she had on her patio. And it turned out the table had been built 50 years before when her husband built the house. And every night they would sit around the table, the two of them, and talk about what their days were like. But here was this table and it was broken. Could we find a volunteer who could fix this table? One of the volunteers happened to be in the office, and he was newly retired and liked to do woodworking. So he went up and talked to this lady, and she showed him the table, which really had been badly damaged. And he said, "Oh, piece of cake, I'll put it together." He spent the afternoon there, leaving everything glued. "Don't touch it. I'll be back tomorrow." He went back the next day, took off all of those clamps, vices, whatever. And the table, there was the table, and it was in one piece. And the member said, "You know what, I'd really like you to come in and have lunch." And so he said, "Well, okay." Sat down at lunch, and there was one place at the table. And he said, "Well, aren't you going to join me?" And she said, "Oh, no. I'm so grateful to you that I just want to, I've made some soup and I've made these things. And I really, really want to be able to give you something. And this is what I can give." And it's stories like that, I mean, I don't know what things turn you on, but that's exciting. And one more story, because I think these are what define Ashby Village. Always. I mean, there's the business of, there's the getting together. Yeah, there's the Zoom, but there are these little connections. We had a member couple, and the husband was trying to write a memoir for family, and he was failing physically, and it was clear that he was not going to be able to finish this on his own. So the member called the office and said, "Do you have someone who can help finish up a memoir?" Okay, well, it may be a little hard to find someone. 2 weeks before, a young woman who was taking time off from her law practice had become a volunteer. And she said, "Oh, I'd like to try that." And 8 weeks later, they met twice a week. 8 weeks later, the memoir was done. It was finished. I mean, where else are you going to find that? I don't know whether that's a little,
And the
you know,
movie anecdote.
oh, the movie anecdote. Oh, and this, and the wife had a couple of evening obligations, and she wanted to find someone who could stay with her husband. And so this young attorney said, "Well, my husband and I love old movies. We'll come and we'll stay with him." So they began their movie and popcorn night, which lasted for another 2 months until he died. But he was so happy. And his wife said, every time she came back, he was just so happy. What can we do but be so happy? I mean, it's, I think that's what it is to me, is to make people happy and to continue allowing us to have dignified lives and to live to the most of our abilities. And Peter, what else was it that I was talking about? As you can see, it's hard to remember these remember these things.
I could just underline a few things, Pat.
Underline.
Just things you mentioned, but just to underline their importance. It's hard to realize when looking at the final product that this is that really the ambitions, you don't have ambitions to form a large organization. You have ambitions to take care of a need and to see it in your own terms. And so just underline what you said, this was really just a few neighbors, and Pat would go to the corner and meet with them, at the corner of Benvenue and Wolsey, and just even before there were formal board meetings or anything. And I developed for them a little what it was, Yahoo or something, mailing list, and it said something like neighborhood group was in the title of it. And the big leap you mentioned, what's his name? Sorry, block.
Ted Rojak?
Ted Rojak. Many of you know Ted Rojak as the author of The Making of a Counterculture back in the 70s. And he was writing it was a very, very well-known book about the increasing role of the younger generation in forming new institutions and taking control of their lives from the older generation. And he was writing
for the younger generation.
Yeah, and he was writing a sequel called The Making of an Elder Culture. So the idea of villages was something he had been reading about and been fascinated with anyhow. And when he called Beacon Hill, it was partly to get information for his book and partly because he wanted to be a member of one of these groups. And when Pat said, well, we're talking about, Bateman neighborhood area around Ashby, we're thinking of calling it Ashby Village in honor of the one artery that goes right through the whole neighborhood. He said, well, you can't do that. And it was not simply that he wanted it. He said, you can't sustain a staff with a neighborhood group. You've got to have something larger. You've got to have a larger pool. And I think he was critical in compelling these group of neighbors to think in larger terms. I just want to underline that whole connection.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, most of you have been involved in organizations, the business organizations. You know what it takes to run a business, to start an organization, to run a business. You have to have, maybe you have to have your bylaws. You got to have strategic plans. You got to have quality measures. You have vendor contracts, insurance, budgets, and those things that we didn't think about in the beginning, but we did. It wasn't, I must say, from the time of the initial discussions in Shirley's living room to past January of 2009, we talked to a lot of people in the community. And this is...
Pat, you're breaking up.
Okay. Where we live in this community, I'm still breaking up? Okay, thank you. Where we live, this Berkeley, Oakland Bay, so lucky because you can put an idea out there And there are people who pick it up and run with it. I mean, that's what really was.
You're breaking up again. I don't know why. Something with our Wi-Fi.
Oh dear. Okay. Well,
Better
is
now.
it still breaking up?
That's better now.
It's okay.
Okay. Okay. I'll
Don't stop.
well, but isn't this true? I mean, as you've lived in and around, I mean, city of Berkeley, I'm thinking of at this particular moment, but as you look around and you want to do something in this community, is you begin to talk to people about it, and they begin to give you their ideas, and they begin to give you their energy. And you know, after the first year, it really, Ashby Village really became the community. Shirley and I were really a small part of this. We had an idea, we started it, you know, with nuts and bolts. We happened to know some really amazing people who became involved. But it's the community, it's everyone, it's all of you who have been through, I mean, from the people who were our initial members who've joined over the years that have given us substance and are the next 10 years, are going to see us into the future. I mean, I think that's the most important thing, is to see us into the future. So that coming generations can build on, can be there, can build on, can know, and can understand the dignity of aging in this community, and how if we didn't have each other, it would certainly be a lot harder. Since the pandemic, Ashby Village has really turned on a dime. I mean, we've learned about Zoom. Volunteers have continued to grocery shop. I'm not going to go to Target, but I have a wonderful, wonderful volunteer, if I call the office, who will take my huge shopping list and go to Target for me. I know people who have recently had some health issues, and they've been very nervous about it. And we're able to, with a Zoom meeting, we're able to convince a physician to allow someone else to come into their telehealth visit, to take the notes, and then to go over them again with the member. And there have been some very important health issues that have been solved because of that. And just for you to know too, that we have such great professionals. Our MedPal team, there's some retired physicians and nurses, and I think Mary Jo was involved in that, who've been given their years of professional experience to their members, who are now their friends. I guess I feel I'm sort of going all over the place here. Let's go some questions. If you have questions in the chat.
I had a question about the name and why the name was chosen and what kind of conversation led to that. Of course, now the name requires a lot of explanation every time we do some recruiting.
Yes, it does. And there have been over the last, especially over the last 6 years, by the board, we've got to change the name. We've got to change the name. Well, they changed the logo on us that I like much better than the one we have now, but that's someplace else. But Ashby Village is how we're known. That's how we're known nationally. And I must say with great pride, we are probably the leading village in the country. We're doing many more innovative things. Again, it's the community that we live in.
I want to know more about the history of the discussion of why that name.
Of why that name? Because we were going to be in 2 zip codes, 94705, which is the one I live in, and one just to the south of us in Oakland, 94613. Ashby Village runs down, Ashby Avenue runs down the middle of 94705. From coming from the tunnel all the way down to the bay. So we thought it just made sense. I mean, and we were 94705. So, and, you know, everybody knows where Ashby Avenue is. It was a very easy decision, really. It was not a big discussion. It was, oh, that makes sense, because we were just going to be right here. Well, I don't know, someday it may be changed. What would you like to hear it be, Joan? Your sound, you're muted, Joan. You're muted. Are we muting Joan?
Okay, there, I'm unmuted now. I'm unmuted now. I was just wondering whether the discussion was, we're going to stay small and around Ashby Avenue, or what happens if we get bigger? Shouldn't we have a name that's more inclusive? And I guess you didn't have that conversation.
We didn't have that conversation.
Okay.
It moved quickly and we just went with it and we liked it. I mean, everybody knew where Ashby was.
Well, the people in Richmond don't, and
Of course they don't. And
yeah.
the people in Oakland, where we're going to be going, and other people, Emeryville and so on. No.
I'm not suggesting the name is a problem. We obviously have established our identity with that name. It's just that it requires a lot of explanation.
It does. It does. But you can make up a story. I think if you can have a contest, making up the story of why it became Ashby Village and why we're not going to change the name. That may be possible. Thanks. Thank you, Joan.
I'm not recommending. I just wanted to know the story.
Oh, I think that's very good. Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Pat, you haven't mentioned anything about the financial part of the founding, and I'm sure that that's important too. It may not be the most interesting part. To be honest, the part I really loved in this is, you know, just going and talking to people in their living rooms, and it's a face-to-face thing, and that's where the caring part gets institutionalized. But that's what that's what this organization is all about. But there is this money part of it, and I'm curious, you rounded up some money somehow, I think, and I wonder if you could say anything about that.
We rounded up some money. We first of all set our membership dues, and our membership dues have never changed. Literally, we are the only village in the country that's not all volunteer. whose membership dues have not changed. It was, there was a lot of discussion. A lot of people thought it was too much. And, it is for some people, which is why it takes a membership fund. But we've never changed the dues. Just as a sidelight, just like really most of the large villages, which are our model, which is the administrative model, about 63% of the budget is covered by membership dues. And the rest of it, we have to fundraise. And actually in this last year, when we were having our 10th anniversary and had special fundraising, we raised well over $200,000. And that's extraordinary to offset expenses. And it does go to prove that people really think this is important, that it's important that we continue, and it's important that we look to the future. We started out with an executive director. That was Andy Gaines. I keep saying we kind of all grew up together. And as we moved along, we had our very first group we had 80 members who were charter members the day we opened, and they had paid in advance their membership dues. So that was the in hand that we had the day we opened our doors. Then we were notified of it, actually asked to apply for the Archstone Foundation, which does a lot of work in the world of aging, a lot of research and so on and so forth. And we were asked to be part of an organization, part of a grant with 5 other California villages, all of different models, to do some research on what kinds of models worked best. And we were funded actually for 3 years, $50,000. My goodness, I mean, that helped enormously. So that's, we are steady. Let me say that now. We're steady. As you know, North Oakland Village has just merged with us, and that's going to extend our membership, and actually extend it into a very different community, which is something that we really have wanted to do for a long time, because we don't reflect our community, the community we live in. And this is something that we've talked about since the very beginning, is that we wanted to be reflective of the people around us. Well, we haven't been, and we're working towards that. Does that answer everything, Charlie? Does that?
Yeah, because I know that you had some grants, so that helped a lot. But I didn't know exactly what that was for, and it was that was really kind of the question was.
Right. Well, yeah, and we got a grant actually from the Long Foundation, from Long's Drugs
Really?
Foundation, to help underwrite the program that we're using, the master computer program that we're using. And one of our positions for the last 4 years has very generously been underwritten by a generous member and donor. We've been very fortunate. It just,
Mhm.
it is, again, it's who this community is. This is something that's important. You know, I used to say when we were out talking to people, you know, we were part of, I don't know where everybody was. I mean, I was part of the free speech movement and anti-war and so on. And we were out there and we were doing things and we were creating things. And we're still out there doing and creating things. We've just added a few years. We don't go out and walk, you know, in the same way that our children and grandchildren do now if they want to, you know, make a statement. So that's who we are.
Yeah.
Anyone else have a question or
Peter wanted to mention that Shirley taught herself web design in order to launch
right.
the first website,
Yes.
and that Lifelong agreed to be our fiscal sponsor at the beginning.
Yes, lifelong medical care. If those of you who know or familiar with the old over 60 health center,
Mhm.
it was in Berkeley, and Lifelong Medical Care, which is now a large not-for-profit community health center.
And Beacon Hill Village sold its manual to help new villages organize and help with its own budget. Now we have some manuals we could sell. That's something to think about.
Well, we've talked about various things that we could sell. And yes, we do have some of those.
The manual preparing for surgery is a great manual.
It is, it is. And there is another one. Actually, we're asked to sell the training, the volunteer training program. And I don't know where that is at this point. It's become, again, it's become a model. Because we've got a lot of people who think of these things, who have experience in designing things like this and just say, go ahead. Yeah, so Shirley Haberfeld, who was the school psychologist for the Lafayette School District, learned how to put together a website. And that was our very first website. We all learned new tricks.
Joan, you had something you wanted to contribute?
Just a sentence that I knew about the village movement. I lived on Beacon Hill in a group house, in the Beacon Hill Friends House, when Beacon Hill Village was organized, and I was a volunteer for them. So I have a little more history in the village movement than just Ashby Village.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you brought lots of good experience as we've put together a number of programs that you have been able to share your experience in education and so on with us. I'm grateful for that.
There's another great story about some friends now and generous donors who were members of the village in New Haven. And when they moved out here, and many of you know them, they,
even Eric Jackson, it's
the Jacksons, right? When they moved out here because their children were here, and children had found a home where they could all live together and with separate entrances, just 3 units, and on College Avenue. So they bought it remotely and then joined the village and contributed before they ever moved here, joined Ashby Village and contributed before they ever moved here. And when they got here, they called immediately and said, does anyone know how to thread speaker wire out, because they were just moving in and needed help with the moving in part, but they were already members and they were already donors, and based on their happy experience with their previous village. So there's some cross fertilization.
There
That's
is.
great. Okay, anybody, more questions?
Pat wanted to know about how we found out about Ashby Village.
Okay, I said that in my introduction, but the rest of you can go ahead.
How you found out, how everyone found out, yes.
Yes.
How did you find out about Ashby Village?
Charlotte?
Judy, I think you got your arm twisted pretty.
Kind of. Well, Joanne Sullivan, who I'm friends with, and I had read the article in the New York Times and thought that this was a wonderful idea. And we started talking about it. And then we found out we both knew Pat through different channels and got involved with Pat and Shirley. So that's how I found out about it.
Okay.
So thank you, Pat.
Thank you. Carol,
Virginia, how did you find out?
Carol, I think was, did she
You have to
next?
unmute. Lower right, oops.
Yeah, I know where it is.
You know,
Okay, so what happened was my husband had recently died and I was just looking around. I tried this and I tried that and I took courses at Ollie and I joined a hula dancing and all kinds of things. And my friend Barbara Butnitz, who is active in the synagogue, said, maybe you'd be interested in Ashby Village. And I said, well, what are you talking about? And I had read about the village movement in the AARP magazine. And so I immediately went online and found a living room chat. And that was a long time ago.
Yes.
And
Those-
Barbara never joined Ashby Village. She just told me about it.
Uh-huh. Yeah, those chats have changed. I think from our very first presentations when we had, poster board with all kinds of information to getting to be pretty, informal and knowing what we needed to do. Yeah, living room chats are very popular and they're great.
Okay, I'll go around again. Virginia, you want to tell us?
Well, I knew about Beacon Hill, and I don't know whether I was doing an internet search or whether I saw something like in the San Francisco Chronicle or on the local news, but heard about Ashby Village, and then probably Googled it and found out something, and then I joined. I had some friends who were in the Boston area who were members of Beacon Hill. So I was very excited that we were going to have something like that out here.
Charlie?
well, I don't remember exactly, except that I had just retired, and my older brother and sister were just in the process of looking at moving into CCRCs. And I thought, well, maybe I should be thinking about the future too. After you quit your work, then, a whole new world opens up to you. And so that's one of the things I wanted to do, was to look ahead a little bit and think what I wanted my life to be like. And I don't remember exactly how I got onto Ashby Village, but I think I have some friends in Boston. And I think I found out about Beacon Hill, and then I started looking here, and I think I found it myself online, as Virginia said. And then I bypassed all the rest of the stuff. I just went in and gave him a check and said, here. And I never had a living room chat, all that stuff, I'm sorry. But I thought, I don't know, but I'm going to try it and we're going to see. And I, throw myself into it.
And Charlie also found us the office that we are presently in.
Yes, he did.
Right.
And
Thank you.
Judy, do you have anything? I know you're part of the original. Are you, do you want to expand on that any?
Well, I remember in the beginning, there was a big meeting at, was it Lifelong, or it was someplace on 6th Street where a lot of people came and we talked.
Uh-huh.
I also remember having a booth at the farmer's market a couple of times, you know, talking about it. And also the Shattuck, when they shut the Shattuck Street down for the street fair, we had a booth there too.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tanya, you need to unmute yourself. Tanya? Unmute. You're muted.
That's chemo. I'm slow.
You're gonna have to stop using that reason here pretty soon.
Yeah, well.
Wait, where did you learn about Ashby Village? You were unmuted.
There we go. I don't know. I really don't remember. I've only been a member for 4 years. I'm kind of like Charlie. I have no idea.
Okay. That will remain the mystery. How
Yeah,
about,
maybe it'll come back eventually.
how about the tarts?
Well, that's a good question because I can't remember, and it seems like I would have to remember. And I do remember we went to one of these living room chats, but I don't know how we got there, anything. We just did.
I can't remember either, but I know we were thinking about changes in our life and whatnot, and we might have read about it in an AARP newsletter thing and then followed it up. But we went to the living room chat. We were very impressed. We signed up, and here we are.
Okay, Mike and Liz and the cat. The cat's tail.
The cat's not a member.
Well, all I can see is the
I
tail.
know roughly what happened. I went through a period of being sick for a couple of months, and I had to ask friends to shop for me and stuff like that. And people kept saying, you really ought to join Ashby Village. A lot of people kept saying that. And so when I was back on my feet, I just called up and went to a meeting. I can't remember her name, that lovely Latin woman who used to work for Ashby Village. Oh, God.
Oh, Manuela?
I'm sorry?
Manuela?
Yes, Manuela. She really helped me because people kept saying, when I called, they kept saying, well, you have to go to a living room chat. Well, I was sick and I couldn't go to a living room chat. And so they kept saying, well, you can't join because you have to go to a living room chat. And I kept saying, well, I'm sick, I can't go to a living room chat. And it went around in circles for quite a while. And then one day, Manuela called and I explained the problem. And I don't know, she performed some magic. And the next thing I knew, I had, I forgot her name. Someone came to my house and signed me up. And I went to a meeting, and when you were still on the other place.
On Durant.
On Durant, yeah. And voila. I remember. Yeah, so I'm very grateful to Manuela because it was one of those catch-22 things where I thought I would never be able to get it resolved. But
somebody was going by the rules. So, Mike?
Nextdoor website. There were a couple of invitations on Nextdoor talking about Ashby Village, and so I went to a living room chat and signed up as both a volunteer and as a member because I was looking for some social outreach because it would have been a couple of years since my wife died.
And you did find some socializing.
Yes, I
did. we won't say any more about that. Let's see. Carol,
socializing that has happened in Ashby Village.
Is there something more of that? Huh? Okay. We skipped Carol's already spoken. Nancy, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Okay, I first heard about it at the Berkeley Brain Exchange. And then I belonged to that group. I can't remember the acronym, TTN, anyway, it was a neighborhood group for what?
Transition Network, yes.
And then they were it was a group of women looking for senior housing. And as I recall, somebody from Ashby Village came and spoke at that meeting. And then that's how I found it.
Okay,
A
Sue?
good find, a good find.
Good.
Sue Deal?
Yeah, I heard about it from church. One of the women there was having a living room chat at her home in July of 2010, so she must have been one of the first members. And I couldn't make it to that meeting. So I found out there was a meeting the next month, and then I joined the month after that. And 2 years later, I found out that the woman who had had that original meeting was probably one of the first people to quit Ashby Village because she had a bad experience with a volunteer. And her experience with the volunteer is now part of the volunteer training. Don't do this.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Joanne, do you want to throw something out here? Unmute, unmute.
I'm doing it.
Okay.
Well, I may repeat, but it's, excuse me. I did read the article about Beacon Hill, independent of Pat, but it was actually Pat and her passing by my house. And then I went to a living room chat before I retired from KQED. And then after that, I started getting, emails from Ashby Village. And so I just decided that after I retired, I was going to join, which I did. So I went to a living room chat, I think about 3 months after I retired, and here I am. So
Here you are. Great. We're glad you're here. Peter, you had no choice, right?
We had read the Times article and discussed it, in the dining room. I mean, it was, the discussion was mutual. It was Pat who went out and did something about it. I just discussed the article and we were both impressed with it. And the Times, it's really interesting. In the early days, we used to go to some of the national conferences, and it was interesting to see how many people, how many villages learned about this through the New York Times article. It was a terrific article, and basically this is a Times local support group or something. These are the Times readers, the Sunday Times readers. It was a very important article, very well done, and set us talking. And I remember, setting up neighborhood mailing list and trying to be helpful in any way I could. But it was Pat's initiative, and then talking with Shirley, who was similarly moved, and just meeting on the street corner. I remember after a while there were more and more people on that street corner until they finally decided to move into someone's living room. But and that was, I guess, the nucleus of what became the board. But it was it was purely a local idea.
We're all very grateful about that local idea. Joan S., do you want to add anything? I'm not going to say your name again. So do you want to add anything?
I do. Okay. I was yanked in by Joan Cole.
Right. Who's yanked in many people.
She has yanked in many people, but this is a cute story about how I met Joan Cole and how I got into her orbit to be yanked in. I was in Cuba, and I met a woman who had a very unusual last name, and because I recognized that name as somebody I had gone to high school with. So I asked her if she was related, and she said, yes, she's my cousin. And I said, well, say hi to her and tell her that my birth name was Joan Cole. And it's true, I was born Joan Cole. And so she said, really? Your name was Joan Cole? I know a woman named Joan Cole in Oakland. You need to meet her. So when I got back home from Cuba, I looked up Joan Cole because we had the same name.
I remember you also facilitated a retreat for the board and the PLT at one time.
Yes, so. I did do that, right.
Okay. Joan Leon? Ooh, unmute.
Done. Okay. Well, you know, I think back to the 1980s, and I was working with Judy Heumann, and I were partnering and trying to start the World Institute on Disability. And Judy was on the board of the Over 60s Clinic with Pat. And she mentioned to me that one of the priorities for this new research institute that we were starting should be aging and disability. And so when we did start it, I took on the responsibility of running the research programs and started to raise money to do research into aging and disability, and began to look at the policy issues. And the outstanding problem was how to keep people home, help people stay out of institutions, seniors, because we had worked, Judy and I and Ed Roberts had worked in the disability movement for ages, and the huge problem in the disability movement was institutionalization. And we really didn't believe that nursing homes and skilled care facilities shouldn't be the only option for seniors as they age. And then I think the next thing I heard about Ashby Village was when I was Andrea Rickenstein and I went to a conference in San Francisco at a time when I was fundraising to develop the Ed Roberts campus. And I was gotten Andrea to work with me to look into mortgage. And Andrea told me that she had just started to work with Ashby Village. And she described it, and I said, I thought it was exactly what I had been looking for, you know, or trying to figure out what we could do it with around aging and disability. So I was determined to watch it, and when I had time to join. So that's all I can say. I've joined. I had known Pat years ago because we had our daughters were friends, but and we lived nearby, but I hadn't pursued that at the time. So that's how I got involved, and I think it's a wonderful organization. It's very impressive. I'm most impressed with what you've accomplished in the way of organizing it and solidifying it in the brief 10 years you've been doing it. It's very wonderful.
Well, I've been rather impressed during the pandemic. Number one, I'd rather be at home than in an institution. I think we all, if we didn't believe before, we've got an example of what we can do. I've also been impressed at the support from Ashby Village and the constant communication and suggestions for programs. And I just think we've had for shut-ins and for a time when we're all shut in, I think it's been a tremendous amount of support. And I thank you, Pat, for having created it. You're innocent, right? And we thank both you and Peter for our presentation today. And
well, thank you. And just a quick addition, you know, that shows how intertwined we are in this community, and especially in what was then the world of aging and disability. Andrea Lichtenstein, who Joan was talking about, had been the fund development person for what was then the Over 60 Health Center when I was the chair of the board at Over 60. And we got to know each other. We became friends. We ended up working together in various projects. And I really wanted her to join Ashby Village as it was beginning. And she was a little leery at first and then came in fully. And she is now, of course, chair of the board, an incredibly knowledgeable person financially. And, you know, I mean, it's all 3 degrees of separation, if not even fewer. Or as a friend used to say, 11 people in mirrors. I mean, we really are all in this together.
We are.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
meeting.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.
And you're welcome to stay for our meeting if you'd like.
Thank you for having me.
Thank
We
you.
hope you come back.
Thank you, Mary Jo.
Okay.
Okay.